The crisp October air drifted through the broad portals of Willow Creek Prep, painting shifting shapes on the gleaming tile floors. Beatrice Ramirez paused outside the door to her new classroom, clutching a worn fabric satchel close to her side. Following decades instructing at neglected schools scattered around the mountain states, she believed she'd encountered everything. But Willow Creek boasted a reputation that preceded it, less for scholastic failure, more for something deeply rooted, a pecking order of advantage that went far beyond any study guide could address. She gently swung open the door to discover 31 pairs of eyes all turned her way. The room hushed uncomfortably, the feeling before thunder. Beatrice saw 3 young ladies draped across the final row, their bodies oozing arrogance. The one in the middle, Tiffany Sterling, sported a stylish cashmere cardigan and a smile that failed to warm her eyes. Her companions, Gretchen and Brittany, stood guard like statues protecting a queen. Beatrice introduced herself with kindness in her tone, sharing that she wished to cultivate a place where everyone felt worthy and appreciated. Before she could finish, a crumpled note soared past her shoulder and thudded onto the chalkboard. Murmurs trickled across the room. She unfolded it carefully, revealing a childish sketch clearly designed to hurt. Instead of answering with anger, she held it up quickly and mentioned its potential, suggesting they pour such energy into their lessons. The laughter faded awkwardly. This wasn't the reaction they had planned. During that opening class, Tiffany's crew tested her constantly with loud sighs, hushed insults, and obvious interruptions. Beatrice handled each challenge with steady grace, guiding discussions and drawing hesitant students into debates. A shy girl named Isabella observed from the back with big eyes, while Damien, a slight student with a clear love for coding, sat curled over his laptop, typing furiously. Both seemed stuck between worry and anticipation. Partway through class, Tiffany rose suddenly, her chair screeching loudly against the floor. She approached Beatrice's desk with obvious slowness, choosing to stand tall over her. She declared that at Willow Creek, specific girls decided the rules and newcomers needed to learn their place. Beatrice met her gaze directly and told her the most vital lesson she could teach was kindness for oneself and others. The classroom held its breath. Tiffany grabbed her satchel from the desk, but Beatrice tightly held one strap. Their eyes locked in a silent battle until she let go with a casual wave, promising she'd receive a proper welcome at recess. When the bell rang for recess, the yard buzzed with the typical noise of teenage energy. Beatrice entered carrying her reusable container, instantly feeling the change in mood. Students elbowed each other, staring. Tiffany and her friends held a central spot that everyone seemed to circle like moons around a cold planet. She selected a bench near the oak tree, hoping to eat peacefully. But Tiffany had different intentions. She called out to her across the crowded yard, her voice echoing over the noise. Beatrice answered quietly, suggesting she eat her lunch. Then Gretchen came up behind her, spilling her overflowing container onto her sweater. Apple slices and berries splattered across her green coat and braided hair. The yard erupted in hoots. Beatrice stood up slowly, fruit dripping from her hair, and turned to face Gretchen. Her voice stayed calm as she asked what she thought this proved. Gretchen only smirked. Then Brittany stretched forward and yanked her coat, ripping the fabric with a sound that seemed amplified in the sudden silence. What happened next occurred in seconds, but would be talked about for weeks. Beatrice's hand caught Brittany's shirt sleeve in a tight grasp. Her body turned smoothly, and Brittany found herself on the ground, gasping for air. Gretchen charged forward quickly, but Beatrice stepped aside, used her movement and sent her sprawling. Tiffany stormed forward, anger replacing her usual sneer. Beatrice blocked her arm, grabbed her wrist, and guided her down to her knees in a hold that was firm but not dangerous. Her voice cut through the stunned silence, stating clearly she hadn't come to fight, but would defend herself and her students if needed. For a moment, nobody moved. Then a single clap broke the quiet. Isabella stood, trembling but determined. Damien joined her. Soon the whole yard burst into applause. Beatrice released Tiffany, who scrambled to her feet, her face red with shame. All around her, phones were raised, capturing video from different angles. The footage would fly through the school's networks in minutes, transforming Beatrice from unknown teacher to viral sensation. Mrs. Olson, the headmistress, pushed through the yard doors moments later, her face worried. Students gathered around, voices mixing as they explained what had happened. Tiffany's group sat messy and quiet, while whispers spread like wildfire about how the new teacher had taken down the school's most feared bullies. Beatrice picked up her container and walked out, the torn coat hanging from her shoulders like a medal she hadn't requested but now carried. Within hours, the video had been sent across every social platform students used. The comments section became a war zone. Some cheered Beatrice as a hero who'd finally stood up to Tiffany's reign of terror. Others questioned whether a teacher using physical force, even to defend herself, had gone too far. By evening, edited versions appeared. Frames changed to make Beatrice's defensive moves look aggressive, captions created to paint her as the villain. Tiffany sat in her family's big home office, watching the different clips on her tablet. Her mother, Mrs. Sterling, served on the school board and wielded considerable power in the town. Tiffany understood this wasn't finished. She gathered Gretchen and Brittany in her game room, tablets open, plotting their revenge. They would paint Beatrice as violent, unstable, a danger to students. Mrs. Sterling had connections. This could be handled. The next day, Beatrice noticed the change quickly. Posters appeared on hallway walls, showing her picture with the word dangerous written across it. Anonymous accounts flooded school forums with fake images and out-of-context clips. In class, students were split. Half seemed energized by her presence, sitting up straight, participating more. The other half traded knowing glances and whispered comments. During her first period, Isabella slipped Beatrice her phone, showing a changed video that had been posted overnight. The audio had been altered to make it sound like Beatrice was threatening Tiffany. Damien leaned forward and offered to check the video's data to prove it was fake. A crisis meeting was called. The school board met in a formal room, tension thick in the air. Mrs. Sterling stood at the head of the table, a folder of printed clips before her. She argued strongly that a teacher who used violence, regardless of the events, could not remain at Willow Creek. Her voice carried authority and hidden anger. Some board members agreed, but Mrs. Olson spoke up from the end of the table, saying that the full original video showed Beatrice acting only to protect herself. Mrs. Sterling dismissed this, claiming that children didn't understand, that power and order needed action from the adults. Meanwhile, in an empty classroom, Beatrice spread papers across a desk. Isabella and Damien sat with her, their young faces serious. Beatrice explained her plan to start a new club, a student-led group focused on building self-respect and teaching self-defense without promoting violence. Isabella suggested calling it the Strength and Support Club. As they smiled at the name, a loud bang echoed from the hallway. They rushed out to find Beatrice's locker damaged, the words "Get Out" spray-painted in black letters. Damien tightened his fists. Isabella's eyes filled with tears. Beatrice simply wiped paint from her hands and told them this proved how important their work was. That afternoon, an email arrived in every student's inbox. The subject line read, "Teacher's Secret," and contained photos from Beatrice's last job, showing her hugging crying students during mentoring. The images had been cut and matched with false captions. Hallway talks became filled with doubt. Some students who defended Beatrice began to question. Others pushed back harder, seeing manipulation. Tiffany watched from her usual spot, a satisfied smile on her face. Beatrice returned to her small apartment that evening exhausted. Her phone buzzed often with anonymous threats and occasional messages of support. She called her sister, voice shaking, and heard the familiar comfort of belief. Her sister reminded her that truth always comes out, no matter how deep someone tries to hide it. Beatrice opened her tablet and began writing a plan for student safety changes at Willow Creek. A community lawyer named Ms. Garcia reached out after seeing local news reports. They met at the local cafe along with Henry Lee, an independent reporter with a notebook always in his hand. Henry showed Beatrice his review of the videos. The original footage showed self-defense. He'd started writing an article outlining the events. Ms. Garcia explained she'd file court papers requiring Willow Creek to keep all security footage, emails, and online posts. Nothing could be removed now. At the school's field, Coach Johnson, a veteran who'd watched Willow Creek's bad culture, gathered a group of students. He asked them if Tiffany or her friends had bullied them. Now was the time to speak. One by one, hands went up. A small freshman said she'd been paying them for months. A sophomore girl described being threatened. 6 students came forward, their stories painting a picture of bullying that had been ignored for years. Tiffany wasn't still. In her game room command center, she and her friends created a new story. They found old photos of Beatrice from a training event, cut them deceptively, and wrote angry descriptions. They created fake accounts to spread the message. Gretchen laughed as new posts went live, sure they'd ruined Beatrice's name. Tiffany's smile was cold. This was just the start. When Beatrice walked through Willow Creek's hallways the next day, she felt the change. Some students avoided her eyes, others whispered behind hands. The damaged posters had increased overnight. Isabella ran up to her, phone in hand, showing the newest fake images. Beatrice looked at them and told Isabella to keep faith in the truth. Damien pushed his glasses up and said he'd worked all night on the data, preparing proof that would show every fake file. Ms. Garcia sent an email to the school board, attaching legal papers that stopped destruction of any records. It was a small move, but important. Henry Lee published his first article, The Truth Behind Willow Creek's Video, with frame-by-frame analysis showing Beatrice's posture, the students' cheers, the order of events. The article got attention, opening a new fight for public opinion. That evening, an email appeared in Beatrice's inbox. If you don't leave Willow Creek, this is only the beginning. She stared at the screen, hand shaking. Fear flickered before turning into resolve. She pulled the torn coat from her closet and spread it across her table. It was more than damaged clothing, it was proof. It was a symbol. She told herself that running wasn't an option. Ms. Garcia brought news the next day. The school board had agreed to hold a public hearing. They likely believed it would be their chance to condemn Beatrice. Instead, Ms. Garcia explained, it would be a stage for truth. Beatrice nodded, her voice firm. She was ready. Let the light show what had been hidden. The day of the hearing arrived, with heavy clouds over Willow Creek. The school's theater had been turned into a courtroom, chairs filled with parents, reporters, and community members. Cameras lined the back wall. Students pressed against the doors, trying to peek inside. Beatrice wore a simple white blouse, the mended coat over her arm. She wasn't hiding the damage, she was owning it. The hearing began with Mrs. Sterling taking the floor, her voice loud. She presented Beatrice as a reckless adult who'd hurt students, saying that Willow Creek's name was at stake. A group of parents cheered. Others booed. Ms. Garcia asked that the full original video be shown on the big screen. The footage played, showing Gretchen spilling her container, Brittany tearing fabric, Beatrice's controlled actions, and the yard erupting in support. The room went silent. Ms. Garcia said that this wasn't violence, but self-defense. Then Mrs. Sterling produced her folder with the fake photos and emails from parents claiming bad behavior. She displayed the image of Beatrice hugging a student. Murmurs went through the crowd. Beatrice explained the context. A counseling session after a student lost a family member seen by adults. Henry Lee projected the original photograph showing the full setting with parents and teachers. Applause broke out. Damien stood, voice shaking. He held up a small device and played audio he'd captured weeks earlier. Tiffany's voice, offering money to anyone who could hurt Beatrice's name. The recording echoed. Tiffany jumped to her feet, shouting that it was fake. But other students rose. Isabella cried about being bullied. Another student described extortion. A third detailed threats. The voices became a flood, students finding courage. Ms. Garcia turned to the board, asking if they could claim this was about one teacher, when it revealed a broken system that had allowed fear to grow. Mrs. Sterling stood, face red, declaring that children's words couldn't decide a school's fate, that she'd protected Willow Creek for years. A parent shouted back that she'd only protected her family's power. Cheers and jeers mixed. The chairperson banged a gavel, trying to restore order. Ms. Garcia then said she was calling for a county investigation because the proof went beyond Tiffany's actions to include money problems in school funding. The room exploded. Mrs. Sterling's face went pale. Reporters' cameras clicked. Parents talked in shock. The chairperson said they'd need to stop for review. Mrs. Sterling screamed that this was a plan to destroy her. Then a voice spoke from the back. The school's treasurer held an envelope saying she had proof of funds being sent to a fake student group under Tiffany's name. Chaos reigned. Beatrice stood still, heart pounding but face calm. She'd planted seeds of truth, but knew the darkness wouldn't give up easily. In the corner, Tiffany slumped, fists tight, eyes locked on Beatrice with hatred. As camera flashes went across the room, she muttered that this wasn't finished. The hearing's results went through the region. Local newspapers ran headlines about student stories and money scandals. State papers picked up the story. The county authority said they'd do a full review of Willow Creek Prep. What had been a school problem became a statewide talk about bullying, advantage, and accountability. Beatrice sat in her apartment surrounded by papers, knowing the fight had grown to face an entire corrupt system. Tiffany, in her bedroom, slammed her fist against her desk. Her tablet screen cracked. Gretchen and Brittany told her to stop, warning that her mother could face serious trouble. Tiffany's eyes blazed as she said that if she went down, everyone went down with her. Ms. Garcia and Henry met with Beatrice at the cafe, spreading a 5-point reform plan across the table. They outlined changes, anonymous reporting, security measures, the Strength and Support Club, teacher training in conflict handling, and student council in discipline. Beatrice read through each point and nodded. She wouldn't accept her job back without changes. Without them, the cycle would repeat. That night, Beatrice walked onto Willow Creek's empty field. Tiffany stood alone near the bleachers. They faced each other until she spoke, voice strained, accusing her of ruining her life. Beatrice stepped closer, her face softening, and told her she was ruining her own life. Real leadership wasn't about bullying or money. Tiffany remained silent, something flickering in her eyes. Doubt, maybe, before she turned away and whispered that she hadn't seen the last of her. News broke the next day. The county authority said there was proof of problems in funding decisions made by Mrs. Sterling. Emails and receipts had been leaked. Parents organized petitions demanding she leave the school board. In classrooms, students whispered about justice. But Damien warned Isabella that Tiffany's eyes had shown something dangerous, a cornered animal's desperation. An anonymous text appeared on Beatrice's phone. "Stop, or someone will get hurt." She sat quietly, jaw set. The threat confirmed she was on the right path. The next day, Ms. Garcia held a press conference, publicly sharing the reform plan. Beatrice stood beside her, explaining that kindness wasn't weakness, but the truest form of strength, the courage to protect others. Applause filled the room. In the crowd, Tiffany stood still, fingers tight around her phone. That evening, Beatrice held the first meeting of the Strength and Support Club in the gym. Isabella, Damien, and a dozen other students attended. She taught them principles, distance, voice, calling for help, staying calm. Nervous laughter turned into practice. Warmth filled the space. Then the lights flickered and died. Darkness swallowed the room. The door clanked shut, locked from outside. Beatrice's voice cut through rising fear, telling everyone to stay close and remain calm. A window cracked open. Gretchen and Brittany slipped inside, phone flashlights showing their faces. They announced they were getting footage worth posting. Beatrice stepped forward, shielding students, demanding they leave. Gretchen reached for Isabella. Beatrice reacted instantly, catching her wrist and taking her to the ground in a controlled hold. Her phone skittered across the floor. Brittany stumbled backward, filming, saying they needed proof of her violence. Damien lunged forward and grabbed the phone, shutting it off. Tiffany appeared at the window, watching but not entering, her face conflicted as she watched her plan falling apart. Police sirens wailed. Officers burst through the door, flashlights sweeping the scene. Beatrice released Gretchen, hands raised, explaining she'd been protecting students. Isabella tearfully described how they'd been locked in and targeted for a staged video. An officer retrieved the phone, finding chat messages detailing the plan. Lock the door, provoke a response, film everything. Gretchen and Brittany were taken into custody, saying that Tiffany had orchestrated it all. But when officers looked for her, only an open window remained, curtains fluttering. Students crowded around Beatrice as police took statements. Their eyes held fear, but also trust. They thanked her for keeping them safe. Beatrice managed a smile, telling them they'd gotten through it together, proof that truth finds its way to light. As the crowd left, Beatrice stepped onto the empty field. Her phone buzzed, another anonymous message promising this was only a small win, that the final round would erase her. She lifted her gaze to the sky, knowing the hand behind these attacks wasn't finished. The night of the lock-in became news. Students launched campaigns demanding justice. Police confirmed Gretchen and Brittany's confessions, saying they'd planned to frame Beatrice. Public anger grew. The school board announced an emergency session open to all. It felt like a trial. Beatrice entered wearing a simple black outfit, the mended coat visible. The chairperson called the session to order, addressing Beatrice's case and the pattern of bullying. Mrs. Sterling, shaken but holding on to power, objected to turning matters into spectacle. A parent stood and shouted that her child had suffered bullying while the administration looked away. This wasn't spectacle, it was truth. Ms. Garcia presented proof, student stories, confiscated phone data, documentation of funds. Henry projected the chat onto a screen, showing Tiffany issuing orders, planning the trap. The room erupted. Tiffany sat hunched, sweat on her forehead. Suddenly she stood, voice cracking, and confessed. She admitted orchestrating everything, driven by her mother's pressure to never show weakness, to always dominate. But all it did was turn her into someone she hated. Mrs. Sterling ordered her to sit down. Tiffany shook her head, tears falling, saying she was tired of living a lie. She turned to Beatrice and apologized, saying that she'd shown her true strength meant protecting people, not destroying them. The auditorium gasped. Some students wept. Isabella squeezed Damien's hand. Beatrice looked at Tiffany with gentle firmness, telling her apology was the first step, but what mattered now was making things right. The board voted immediately. 5 members approved Ms. Garcia's plan, and Mrs. Sterling resigned. The nightmare was over. Beatrice remained at Willow Creek, a reminder that even in the darkest corners, light can always break through.